The city of Ravensport had always been a place of restless energy. By day, its streets bustled with the hum of life, children laughing in the parks, vendors calling out their wares, the steady rhythm of cars navigating the narrow roads. But by night, a shadow loomed over the city, growing darker with each passing week. It began with one child, a 6-year-old boy named Daniel Carter, last seen riding his bicycle down his quiet suburban street. His mother had turned her back for only a moment, and when she looked again, the bike was lying on the pavement, the wheels still spinning, but Daniel was gone. At first, the police assumed it was an isolated case. Children wandered off sometimes. They got lost. But as days turned into weeks with no trace of the boy, unease settled over Ravensport like an autumn chill. And then it happened again. A little girl this time, 7-year-old Lily Hart, taken from her own backyard. Her father had been grilling dinner just a few feet away. One moment, she was playing with her stuffed rabbit, and the next, she had vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away, just the echo of her giggles hanging in the air, swallowed by the silence that followed. Panic spread like wildfire. Parents clutched their children's hands in iron grips, fearful of letting them stray even a few feet away. Playgrounds emptied, schools reinforced security. The news ran endless coverage, each broadcast more urgent than the last. Theories surfaced, ranging from kidnappers to something far worse, something unexplainable. By the time the fourth child disappeared, the fear had transformed into something sharper, something that lingered in every whispered conversation and every hurried glance over a shoulder. The city was no longer just afraid. It was suffocating under the weight of terror. And in the heart of Ravensport, something watched. Something waited. The city never noticed him. He walked among them, a shadow in the crowd, blending seamlessly with the rush of daily life. To most, he was just another face, unremarkable, forgettable. And that was exactly how he wanted it. No one ever suspected the man behind the mask. He was there when the morning sun bathed the streets in gold, sipping his coffee at the corner cafe. He nodded politely to the barista, who never once questioned why she could never quite recall his name. He strolled through the parks where children played, offering warm smiles to passing parents. A simple man, a quiet man. Nothing about him screamed danger. But beneath the surface, behind that carefully crafted facade, lurked something far darker. He watched, he waited, he chose. It always started the same way, a fleeting glance, a moment of opportunity. He was patient, never rushing, never drawing attention. The key was invisibility, the kind that only came with experience. And he had years of it. The first time had been a mistake, or so he told himself, a moment of weakness, a temptation he hadn't been strong enough to resist. But the thrill had lingered long after the act was done, sinking its claws into him, reshaping him. Now, it was no longer about impulse, it was about control. His victims were always innocent, always pure. They trusted too easily, their laughter ringing like fragile chimes in the wind. He thrived on that trust, on the moment their eyes widened in realization, when innocence crumbled into fear. Yet, the city still didn't see him. The news spoke of the disappearances, of the growing panic. Journalists theorized, detectives searched, parents wept. Posters lined the walls, faces of the missing staring back at pedestrians who walked by, oblivious to the predator in their midst. He was there, standing among them, watching their fear grow. And still, no one saw him, because the most dangerous monsters don't hide in the shadows. They stand in plain sight, and they smile. Detective James Holloway had seen his fair share of darkness. After 15 years in the force, he thought he had learned to read the patterns of crime, to predict the twisted logic behind the worst of humanity. But this case, this predator, was different. The man behind the mask wasn't just killing, he was hunting. It started with the missing children. Their faces lined every bulletin board, their names whispered in every fearful conversation. No ransom notes, no witnesses, no bodies, just silence. A ghostly void where laughter had once been. Holloway spent sleepless nights combing through files, searching for a common thread. The victims came from different neighborhoods, different backgrounds. No clear link, except for one chilling fact. They all vanished in places brimming with people, parks, grocery stores, even schoolyards. Someone had taken them right under everyone's noses. It wasn't until the fifth disappearance that Holloway caught his first break. Security footage. A blurry clip from a convenience store across the street from the last known sighting of 10-year-old Michael Reeves. At first glance, it showed nothing unusual, just pedestrians going about their evening. But then Holloway noticed him. A man in the background, half hidden by a lamppost. He wasn't watching the store. He was watching Michael. The man never approached, never interacted, just observed. And then, as the boy walked away, the man turned and vanished into the crowd. A cold weight settled in Holloway's chest. He replayed the footage again, then again. Something about the man felt wrong. He wasn't hurrying like the other pedestrians. He wasn't looking at his phone or checking his watch. He was completely still, controlled, like a predator studying his prey. Determined, Holloway dug deeper. He scoured security cameras near other abduction sites, combing through endless hours of footage. And then he found him. Different days, different places, different clothes, but always there. A man who blended in so perfectly no one ever noticed him. The mask wasn't made of plastic or cloth. It was his face, ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of face that never drew a second glance, the kind of face that had been standing right next to them the whole time. Holloway's stomach twisted as a horrifying realization settled in. This wasn't a man who hid in the shadows. He was in the daylight, moving among them, unnoticed, and he wasn't done. The killer was still out there, and now he knew someone was watching him back. Detective James Holloway's pulse pounded as he gripped his gun, moving silently through the abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with dust and decay, the stench of rusted metal mixing with something far worse, the lingering presence of death. He knew he was here. The man behind the mask, the city's phantom, the monster who had haunted Ravensport for months, slipping through the cracks, taking child after child. But tonight, it ended. A single tip had led Holloway here, an anonymous call, a whispered address before the line went dead. It could have been a trap. It was a trap. But he didn't care. He had followed the clues, tracked the man's patterns, pieced together his movements like a twisted puzzle. And now he was close. Too close. A faint sound echoed through the cavernous space. A footstep? A breath? Holloway's grip tightened on his gun as he stepped forward, his eyes sweeping the darkness. Then he saw it. A row of old storage cages, their rusted bars reflecting the dim glow of his flashlight. And inside, movement. Holloway's stomach twisted as his light landed on the figures. Small, fragile, children. They were huddled together, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, their eyes wide with fear. "Detective." The voice came from the shadows, software, almost amused. Holloway turned sharply, his gun raised. A figure emerged from the darkness, moving with a calm, calculated ease. The man behind the mask. Except there was no mask, just an ordinary face. A forgettable face. The kind that could vanish in a crowd, that could stand beside you in line at a coffee shop without a second glance. And yet, behind those eyes, something inhuman lurked. "You've been looking for me," the man said, tilting his head slightly. "And I've been watching you." Holloway's jaw clenched. "It's over." The man's lips curled into something that almost resembled a smile. "Is it?" Then, darkness, a sudden crash, lights flickering, movement, fast, too fast. Holloway barely had time to react before the man lunged, a flash of steel, a knife. Holloway dodged, the blade grazing his side, pain igniting his nerves. He fired, the shot echoing through the warehouse, but the man was already gone, slipping into the shadows like a phantom. "Come on, detective," the voice whispered from somewhere unseen. "You know how this ends." Holloway pressed a hand to his wound, his breathing ragged. He wouldn't let this monster win, wouldn't let him take another child. His eyes flickered to the cages, the children. Focus. He moved carefully, listening, waiting, then, there, a shadow shifting near the support beams. Holloway fired again, the bullet tearing into metal. A low chuckle echoed back, and then, the mistake. The man moved, a flicker of motion in the corner of Holloway's vision. Got you. Holloway turned sharply, his gun leveling just as the man lunged again. This time, Holloway didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. The bullet hit its mark. The man staggered, eyes wide, disbelief flickering across his face as he collapsed to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and thick. He let out a shuddering breath, lips parting as if to speak. But no words came, just silence. Holloway exhaled, his body trembling. It was over. He moved quickly, breaking open the cages, his hands steady despite the pain. The children ran to him, clinging to his arms, their sobs echoing in the empty warehouse. Sirens wailed in the distance. Back up. Too late, as always. Holloway glanced once more at the body, at the man who had tormented this city for so long. No mask, no monster hiding in the shadows, just a man who had finally been stopped. And as Holloway led the children out into the night, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The hunt was over. The city of Ravensport breathed again. The man behind the mask was dead. The missing children had been found. Their families wept, their prayers answered at last. The headlines called Detective James Holloway a hero, a savior, the man who had stopped the monster. But as Holloway stood outside the precinct that night, staring at his own reflection in the window, he felt no relief, no triumph, only the weight of a single question. Had he served justice, or had he taken revenge? The official report was clean. The suspect attacked first. Holloway fired in self-defense. End of story. The department shook his hand. The mayor called him personally. Parents hugged him, their gratitude overflowing. And yet, the image wouldn't leave him. The way the man had looked up at him in those final seconds, not afraid, not angry, amused, as if he had won, even in death. That was what haunted Holloway, because deep down he knew the truth. He had taken the shot before he had to. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was rage, maybe it was something darker. He had hunted this man for months, felt his presence in his nightmares, traced his footsteps through crime scenes that reeked of despair. The fear, the frustration, the helplessness. Holloway had carried it all like a sickness. And in that warehouse, when the moment came, he hadn't hesitated. It should have felt like justice. But it didn't. The man had never spoken his name, never revealed his true identity. Holloway had spent months chasing a phantom, and now that phantom was gone. No trial, no confession, no answers. Just a lifeless body on a cold floor. And maybe that was the real victory. Because justice meant the world got to see the monster unmasked. But revenge? Revenge was simpler. It was final. It erased the fear, snuffed it out in an instant. Had he done the right thing? Had he done what was necessary? Holloway didn't know. Maybe he never would. But as he stood there, watching his reflection waver in the glass, one thing became clear. Justice was supposed to bring peace. So why did this feel like the beginning of something far worse?